The Major Spoilers podcast covers news, reviews, and of course, spoilers, and goes into details about the topics discussed. So if you haven't read, listened, or watched the items we talk about, you might want to come back later.
I'm Matthew.
And I'm Stephen, and you're listening to the Major Spoilers podcast, the podcast for pop culture and comic fans.
In this issue, it was a rough road. It was a rough road. It was a rough road. We took the bus. So we look into youth group run. The beta breakers break free and other things are happening. It's like a buddy cop movie where the buddies are nerds and the explosions are mostly interpersonal. But we're here to leave it all in the ring. Your seat is free, but you only need the edge because the Major Spoilers podcast is on the air.
Welcome to issue 1084 of the Major Spoilers podcast. Thank you for downloading and checking us out this week. Going to start out.
Slim Jim.
Oh man, I do that every morning. So here's the thing. We're going to go off into a really weird track here. Do you eat the Slim Jims, or are you too old for that?
I've been known to eat a Slim Jim here and there.
I like the Tabasco Slim Jim. I don't like any of the other flavor. I don't like any of the other flavors of Slim Jims. But here's the thing. It's called a frickin' Slim Jim. They sell these Slim Jims today that are like as round as your thumb. And I know what you're thinking. Doesn't Matthew have a mighty big thumb? Yes, ladies and gentlemen. And I can't stand these giant, $50 rounds. They're not Slim Jims. They should be called Fat Jims or something. Or Husky Jims.
Don't you do it.
Husky Jims.
Do it. Okay.
Husky Jims is what they should call.
I don't like those.
Have
a show all by yourself.
No. I don't like those because I bite into them, and all the minced meat that's inside of there is gross. Right. But if you eat an actual Slim Jim, snapping. They actually snap. And if your Slim Jims don't snap, then I don't have any desire to get your Slim Jims. But I'll eat a beef stick of some kind in the morning for protein. So there you go. Stick. So you like the Tabasco ones?
Tabasco ones are good. There's a teriyaki one, I think, that I get. Oh no, they're good. You should.
I've tried the teriyaki. I don't care for those. I don't care for the original Slim Jims either. And I know that's weird. And then they have these Slim Jims that are like nacho cheese Slim Jims.
Who cheese are they?
God, they're gross, is what they are. All right, let's get back to something that people are actually interested in: comic book sales.
Yeah.
ICV2 has released their latest one. Of course, they always do this right around San Diego Comic-Con time, which is next week, by the way. If you're not going, probably too late to get your tickets. But they say that the comic book and graphic market is down 7% in 2023. Interestingly, they say that graphic novels are down 7% and periodicals are down 6% overall in each of those channels. That is compared to, so this year, if you think about it, this year the comic market has done $1.85 or $1.86 billion worth of sales. Okay, that's a lot. Okay, so if people are like, oh, the comic book industry is dying. If you go back to pre-pandemic, so if we go back to 2018, I guess we could say 2019 because technically 2019 is pre-pandemic. 2020 is when everything went to heck. 2019, comic book sales were $1.12 billion. So we're still $600 million up from where we were pre-pandemic. Now we are down, 7%. That's like $200 million from the year before, and only down about $100 million from where we were in 2021. Personally, I don't know about you, Matthew, but I'm not going to be screaming that the sky is falling over this.
I'm not either, because the first thing I look at a 7% deviation is what's our standard deviation.
Yeah, they don't have a standard deviation, but they do go into a methodology where they're talking about how they collect the information. And of course, they use Comic Hub for a lot of that, which I question. I mean, I don't know enough about Comic Hub to say whether it's a legit source of data analysis or not, but I know that I don't think it includes Lunar or the other publishers either. So.
And that would be my big question. And honestly, when if I look at a one digit deviation or drop or whatever you want to call it, that sounds fine. I mean, I swear the other day somebody was saying, oh, we're down 20%. Oh, well, okay. Month over month, are we down 20%? I feel like maybe it's just me because the way my day job works is very, very number intensive, and you would never know it to hear me on this show. But there is a 3 to 5% uh, basically dropped call rate always baked into the numbers. And I try to make people understand this, that we cannot stop that 3% drop call rate. And if it gets up to 6%, you're still well within that deviation. Now, when we get to, if we have 10, 12, 15% dropped calls, then you have a problem. But the difference between 3 and 6, you're right in there.
It's
That's what's
double.
going to
It's
happen.
double though.
It's double, but don't even.
No, I'm just being the other.
I'm not
people.
doing it here.
So here's the thing though. A couple of things that they do point out is that they say that they are no longer tracking digital sales because of the way that so many publishers, including DC and Marvel and others, have gone to subscription based, like the unlimited services that they have. So they really can't track individual values off of that. So what they have done is they've removed all of their digital data from previous years when calculating this year's stuff. So when I said that in 2019, it was $1.12 billion, that is minus the digital sales from that year. So, it's not like you're saying, oh, so they took out the digital sales this year. That would account for that, because I think it says in the report something like that is about $100 million in digital sales, 155 million in digital sales, which would be very close to that 3% or 2% drop in that. Still would be a 4% drop overall. The other thing that, I don't know if you've read this article, Matthew, all the way through or not, but the other thing that they mention, and I'm not really clear if they're actually calculating it into their overall annual sales, is they do talk about Kickstarter. Comics on Kickstarter had a big year, up 30% in dollars raised from backers in North America. But they don't say whether they have included that as part of their comic data or not. And the only reason why I say that this is interesting is because there has been a trend, and this has been going on in the gaming industry for a while, and people are starting to question it. And I've kind of questioned it in the past. Also, they don't mention Indiegogo or any other fundraising sites and campaigns in this. They only mention Kickstarter. But a lot of publishers, Dynamite is doing this, Zenoscope is doing this, and I'm not saying that they're big publishers, but they're well-known names. It's not like, Bob Xerox Comics and Surplus is on Kickstarter and does 30%. We're talking about Dynamite and others. Boom Studios just has a Kickstarter going on. There is another one that's got a Kickstarter going on from, I forgot who it was, but it's a big deal. I'm wondering if some of this graphic novel market, yes, they are tracking book sales. Yes, they are tracking individual comic book store sales or estimating comic book store sales. But if they're not counting that 30% surge in comics on Kickstarter, because those are direct market stuff, it's not going through Diamond, it's not going through other places. Right. I think we're seeing a move in the game industry, in the video game industry. We're cutting out GameStop, and we don't have Blockbuster anymore because of streaming services. But I think some of these businesses are starting to realize that they're no longer a B2B business, where B2B means business to business company, for those that don't know. Matthew knows, of course. But where the B2B is DC sells to the wholesaler Diamond sells to the retailer then sells to the customer. And that's the B2C part, the business to consumer or business to customer. And I think that these publishers and these game manufacturers are realizing, wait, if we go to Kickstarter, we can bypass these other two distributor outlets and we can go directly B2C. And I think that these companies are starting to see that, and they're starting to test the waters on seeing if they could be a direct to consumer, almost like they were in the old days, Matthew, where you would have a mail order service and you didn't have to go through a Diamond to order your comics. But I think that might account for some of that 7% drop, are those people who are getting their stuff on crowdfunded sites.
It's a definite possibility.
I mean, if you knew that, hey, I'm following this, I'm a big fan of the Marvel United games from Cool Mini or Not or Come On. They've got a DC United that just launched last week, and I'm following that very closely. I've bought into it. But, they've already got over 7,000 people that have contributed to this campaign in under a week. And they'll probably get another 3,000 people by the time the campaign, maybe 4,000 people by the time the campaign is over. If they had to try to figure out, okay, how many sales could we get off of the base box? And then how many expansions are we going to have to do? And do we sell these, stretch goals as individual figures in a store? That would be a nightmare to try to calculate that out and figure out where those places are going to be. And certainly for the consumer, if I have to run all over the country tracking down these little exclusives or these expansions or whatever they are, that's a nightmare to try to do. But if Cool Mini or Not can sit there and say, oh yeah, we've got, 10,000 people that are going to buy this directly, then maybe we only do 2% on top of that we send out to the Walmarts or the Targets or to the individual game stores to pick up some additional sales. But other than that, we're selling directly to the people who are most interested in buying this game. And I think the comic book companies are starting to do that too. So those are some thoughts and observations I had, because this is news that ICV2 just sent out today, I believe, July 15th, or yesterday, I guess. Monday.
Nice.
So I don't know what your thoughts are on any of that stuff.
That's an interesting point. It's not one that I had considered because, I think that especially if you ever worked in, comic book direct sales, there is an active don't think that way kind of thought process going on, because for so long it's been, okay, your success is we've sold this million copies of X-Men to the retailers. They're out there now.
Yeah.
Our work here is done.
Yeah.
And then the retailers are like, but we have not sold 1 million copies of this to the people who want the comics. And so, you do get into that weird question. We have long had that weird question of that diamond monopoly all took place behind a curtain of obscurity on an island of mystery shrouded in shrubbery. So having that change possibly be, people going straight to the Kickstarter. Some of the books that I have been following for a few years are now Kickstarter only books or Indiegogo only books. And I'm still getting my issue, which I really love. I'm getting Big Bang Comics when it comes out, and that's great. And I feel like that, if it's not the future of comics, is definitely part of a future.
Well, and so again, I'm not saying that going directly to Kickstarter and surpassing the comic book store is the best idea out there. But if you have an untapped market and you're trying to just figure out how many people are actually going to buy this, so we don't ship 1 million copies and we're on the hook for printing 1 million copies of something that are then going to be thrown in the East River. I think that crowdfunding campaigns, and I've kind of been a proponent of crowdfunding since Kickstarter started. Good Lord, I want to say 2006 or something like that. Because I remember in class, I was pitching to students. I was like, hey, what if you didn't have to speculate on raising how much money you could make at the box office from your movie? What if you kind of pre-sold tickets based on you going to your audience and pitching them this idea of your movie and having them prepay for tickets and help pay for the production of your movie? That would be a pretty cool thing. And I had a whole lecture at one point about this idea. And it may have been right around the same time that Kickstarter started, 2009. So it was probably a year before Kickstarter.
Right.
So, yeah. So
was this before you accidentally created Patreon?
No, I didn't create Patreon. Although no, I didn't. No, because we were using PayPal, and that was a thing. But no, I'm not saying I created Kickstarter. I was just talking to students saying, hey, if you're thinking about how does your business work, are you going to run on speculative markets? Where, we were just talking this week on Top 5, we're talking about our top 5 underrated movies. And there are some movies that you're like, look at this actor, look at this story plot, look at these things. This should make $100 million in the box office. And then it goes to the box office and you're like, womp womp, $15 million. And you're like, how did this happen? Well, it's probably because either the movie didn't get promoted correctly, the movie didn't get into the right theaters, or didn't stay in the theaters long enough in the case of some movies that have come out recently. What if you could have gone to the people that are most interested in this and you created a campaign and said, hey, here's this idea for the Untouchables. I think it was 2 or 3 that I was using as the example. Not Untouchables. What's the one with all the big action stars?
Expendables.
Oh, Expendables. Is that okay? So what if you could do the Expendables 2 or 3? I think I was pitching at the time, and I was like, you say, here's all our actors that are lined up. We need $200 million to do this. You kick in $20, we give you a free ticket and maybe a t-shirt or something. Probably not a physical good, because that's not a good idea. But back then I probably said a t-shirt was probably the way to go. And then depending on how high up you went, you could get other perks. And I was like, this seems like a great way to fund your movie. And then of course I find out about Kickstarter and other crowdfunders out there. So, yeah, I don't think this is doom and gloom. So if people are like, oh, comic sales are down, it's still $1 billion industry. Okay. Yeah. Don't worry about it. When it drops below a $1 billion industry, maybe that's when you can have a little concern. But if you look at the chart, comic book industry has been over $1 billion for 5 years now. 2018 is the last time it was below $1 billion. And even then, the 5 years prior to that, it was still in the 900 million range. So don't discount this yet.
Yeah, it's money.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you discount it, then they make less money.
How about we do some reviews?
Au revoir.
Matthew, what'd you read this week?
I read a bunch of comics, but the one that really threw me into a flying tizzy, was Savage Dragon, number 271 from Image Comics, out last week. Art, story, and all possible litigation by Eric Larson. We've been talking about Savage Dragon off and on now for, 70 issues? 4 or 5 years.
Like 18 years?
Yeah, well, at a certain point, before issue 200, Eric Larson's Savage Dragon got put in the adult section of the previous catalog. And Eric Larson said, oh, I'm an adult comic. Okay. And so started doing an adult comic. And what that means is the main character, Savage Dragon, Malcolm, who's actually the son of the first Savage Dragon, is in a loving relationship with his young wife, Maxine. And Malcolm and Maxine have a lot of sex. And because this is an adult comic drawn by Eric Larson, who can draw what he wants, that sex happens on panel. They have recently, the dragon and Maxine and their 4 children, relocated from Canada to San Francisco. And as part of their return to San Francisco, return to the United States, they are running in the Bay to Breakers rally. And this is apparently known for people running this race naked. So throughout this issue, Maxine Dragon is running completely naked, wearing pink boots and a backpack. Now, all of that is set up for what I need to tell you next. I believe, was it this year or last year that Steamboat Willie passed into the public? It was at
the start of this year.
Yeah. So recent issues of Savage Dragon have featured a certain Mr. Mouse. And since he's in the public domain, he keeps popping up in Savage Dragon. And he's being written as this over-the-hill actor who used to be in cartoons and played the character of Mickey Mouse. And so Mickey has shown up several times and has this affection for Maxine, Mrs. Dragon. So in this issue, as she's running naked, supervillain attack breaks out. Mickey Mouse is like, oh, I'm going to save you. And while saving her, he also grabs her in very, very vividly disturbing places. Because, again, this is the stick figure Mickey Mouse from 1936. So the issue is split equally between 3 plots. Malcolm is fighting a supervillain who is absolutely not an internet celebrity who has his own site with wars and info, and absolutely is not that person using his last few funds to create a battle suit and attack people rather than pay off the debt that person has incurred. The other story is Paul Dragon, and this is long and complicated. Let's just say he's an older Savage Dragon from an alternate universe, hanging out with Malcolm and Maxine's 3 children and their imaginary friend, who is absolutely not Mr. Takitani. So that third story involves Maxine beating the stuffing out of Mickey Mouse. And Mickey Mouse is like, oh, come on, you know you love me. And she's like, no, leave me alone. I'm not going to sleep with you. And of course, this is an adult comic. I am sanitizing greatly. And Mickey Mouse is like, come on. And then Mickey's wife shows up. And Mickey's wife is very, very unhappy. Now, Mickey's wife is not, to my knowledge, in the public domain.
No, Minnie Mouse certainly is, because she was also in
Was she in
Steamboat
that?
Willie.
Okay.
Everything that appeared in
Okay.
Steamboat Willie. So Peg Leg Pete, Mickey Mouse, Steamboat Willie, Clarabelle Cow.
Right.
Depending
Those
on
are
how
those
you look at.
original designs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So his wife, who is only identified as his wife or dear, shows up and punts him right in the nards and then hits him over the head with a baseball bat and runs off. And then, of course, Maxine is like, oh man, I had to fight Mickey Mouse and he was trying to grab me. Now, here is another thing that you need to know. If
I'm not sure I need
the,
to know. I'm looking at some of the art right now, and I'm not sure
yeah,
I need to know.
Maxine Dragon is a nude woman. And unlike most nude women that you see in comics, she is anatomically correct. So in many sequences, there is a very clear view of various parts of her anatomy, including at least 20 or 30, not necessarily close-ups, but shots that involve Maxine's genitalia fully in view. If that is a problem for you, don't ever read Savage Dragon. Because I do believe that Maxine Dragon's genitalia are actually billed sixth in the number of appearances. But it is so funny. I cannot tell you. And a part of me is ashamed at how much fun this story is, because if you think about, an over the hill actor coasting on his laurels in kind of a post Me Too era, it is difficult to talk about that era because a lot of those changes those people have been, oh no, and then they're right back a year later. But if you think of this from that perspective, it is quite funny. And then Malcolm ripping the helmet off of the evil guy who's talking about, all of the things that are going to destroy society, and finding the character who is absolutely not that guy. Uh, that's funny. That is really, really funny. And it's actually got some sweet moments with the dragon kids and their maybe imaginary dragon friend. It's just throughout this whole book, it's like I'm looking at a creator drawing exactly what he wants, and he doesn't care. He doesn't have an editor telling him no. He doesn't have anyone saying, you can't make fun of this celebrity and have them be an idiot supervillain, or you can't make fun of this character, or you can't take Mickey Mouse and put him in these horrifying positions just because it entertains you. The way Wally Wood did back in 1967 with the Disneyland Memorial Orgy print. That's just like, I also enjoy that, and it's terrible, and there's a part of me that is ashamed of it, but I cannot be ashamed of Savage Dragon 271 because it is pure comics. And it's pure comics in a way that I will not tell you that this is a comic for everyone, nor do
Oh
I
no,
believe
it's
this
not a
is.
comic for everybody. No.
Yeah.
This
This is a comic for
is one
people
of those.
over 21.
Listen, last week on the show, I did a whole thing about the Comic Code Authority or actually the Hays Code, and how that led to all of the different rating systems on here. And this is definitely a comic that is NC-17.
Oh my gosh, it is NC 53. But if you are over the age of 21, legally able to buy items that contain detailed human anatomy, and interested in kind of old school comic book storytelling by someone who definitely has a specific point of view and has a lot to say in a superhero format, and is not ashamed of it being a superhero format, because the designs for Absolute DC came out, and I'm just like, okay, why? But that's another tangent. Ignore that tangent. Savage Dragon, 5 slices of meatloaf. It will not be for everybody. And part of me is just like, you should not find this as funny as you do. But it is funny, and it is entertaining, and it's weird, and it's sweet, and it's sexy in a vaguely adult way that doesn't quite turn into prurient, but does have that moment of oh tee, and it's really hard to
I'll be honest,
describe. But
it's
he's
beyond
spinning plates.
tee. I think Eric
Yeah,
Larson,
he's spinning plates.
Eric Larson really probably could do quite well with an OnlyFans or an adult Patreon with his stuff. No, seriously, there is an adult
I know.
Patreon, and Patreon's very careful of what they do.
Right.
OnlyFans has restrictions on creators as well, but I think he could probably do quite well with taking some of his adult humor and adult ideas to those places. It may not just be the characters from Savage Dragon, but I do know that there are several creators who do adult only comics on
Sure.
Patreon and do quite well with them. And I think this might be, but of course, by the time that Eric Larson updated his OnlyFans or adult Patreon post, it would be 6 years later. So you've got that to watch out for as well. So, all right. Thank you.
You do have that to keep in mind.
Yeah,
So
thank you for that, Matthew. All right.
that
Out
woman
this
is
week.
naked. That's all I'm saying.
Out this week from IDW Publishing, it is The Rocketeer Breaks Free, #1, written by Stephen Mooney with art by Staz Johnson. I think I've come to a realization about The Rocketeer, and this is something that's been kind of one of those long time coming things. Dave Stevens really understood pulp heroes like Doc Savage and Rocketman to the Moon and Commando Cody and all of that stuff. He had a real love and passion for that. He also had a real love and passion for Betty Page, whom he modeled Betty in the comic The Rocketeer on. And he also understood, his art style is so fluid and so dynamic. I miss Dave Stevens just because of how detailed his art is and how fluid everything runs. But I think even Dave Stevens would tell you that the Rocketeer is maybe kind of a one-note kind of character where he's always going to have to fly, he's always going to be in trouble with Betty, and he's probably always going to be fighting somebody bad. Gangsters maybe in the early days, but with the success of The Rocketeer, or maybe as an underrated action movie, the unsuccess of The Rocketeer, I think in a lot of people's minds, The Rocketeer is somebody who's constantly punching Nazis in the face. And so after Dave Stevens' passing and companies are starting to do Rocketeer comics like IDW Publishing, you have either this weird romance stuff or Cliff Secord is flying around the world in a great race of some kind. Or in the case of Breaks Free, he's going to San Francisco to support Betty in a film, and Peevy is coming with him, and he's trying to be a good person by not being the Rocketeer, but he has to be the Rocketeer. And also there's Nazis. And I think that for a character who was really created, Depression, he wasn't created in the Depression, but he is a Depression era character who basically lasts through World War II and maybe a little bit into the 50s. We don't know how far we could tell Rocketeer stories, but if you look at comic books and the pulps, and you see how the age of the Rocket Man, especially the pulp Rocket Man, Commando Cody, etc., kind of fell away after World War II, and we start getting into more space characters, space pulps, I guess. The Rocketeer only has a very short life, and there's only so many stories that you can tell in that time span of a decade and a half, 15 years. So if that's the case, and my God, the Nazis are everywhere. They are behind every door. They are lurking under your bed tonight, Matthew. That creaking that you hear, no, it's not rats, it's Nazis, and they're coming for you, Matthew.
Rocketeers.
And I love the Rocketeer. Don't get me wrong. In my youth, I would go to every comic book store from Topeka, Lawrence, Kansas City, even Wichita at times, a couple of times, to look for Rocketeer comics because they were so hard to find. And when I found one that I hadn't read before, it was like, this is a treasure. Oh, by the way, this is issue 4 out of 5 or whatever it was. And I've only got issue number 1. So I have no idea what's going on, but dang, the art is pretty. I think that, and don't get me wrong, Stephen Mooney is telling a very interesting story. It's got a lot of humor in it, but it feels like I'm getting the same thing again and again and again. You know, it's like the Honeymooners. Every Honeymooners episode is basically the same 3 plot points. And I think that is, unfortunately, the Rocketeer is starting to fall into that same pattern. Not that that's bad, because, you know, listen, I like enjoying a Slim Jim in the morning. It's part of my routine. Eat a Slim Jim, go to work. So I understand sitting there and using the same tropes and the same setups and some of the same plot points again and again and again is that Slim Jim that we all need in our lives. But at some point, you're going to bite into a Slim Jim and you're going to go, my God, my heart and chest are kind of burning right now. Maybe I need to cut back on the Slim Jims a little bit. And I think I need to cut back on the Rocketeer a little bit. Because while the story is fine and the
Nazi
storytelling, the Nazi heartburn is really too much. I'm going to punch that Nazi heartburn right in the chest. Ow! I think it's time for me to step back a little bit from the Rocketeer until I really see something that is new and different. Because it just feels like we're retreading the same thing again and again. And again, nothing against Staz Johnson on the art. I think it's Staz Johnson. If I'm doing that wrong, I apologize. But there's something about a Dave Stevens drawing that is just so dynamic and has so much motion in it. And while the art here is good, a lot of times it feels very stiff. And so, yeah, I'll probably finish this series. It's only 4 issues. I think it's a 4-issue miniseries. And there's Nazis, and it's Thanksgiving time, and it's 1938. So, you know, we're in that time period that I kind of really dig when we talk about the pulp era. And so I'll probably finish this out. And I know that they're not just constantly pumping out Rocketeer books. But I think after this one, I think I'm going to have to take a break. Because I think that I think I've had too much Rocketeer. And so while this is a good issue, it's not a great issue. It's a very familiar setup, but the art and story and the storytelling is good. Don't get me wrong. Don't make me think that, oh my God, I've read this same story 1,000 times, because no, we haven't been to San Francisco. We haven't met Betty's friend and her mother, and they're there for Thanksgiving, and the mother kind of has a thing for Peevy, and Nazis are in the Bay of San Francisco. No, we haven't seen that stuff before. So yes, it is good. And don't get me wrong. The pulps are full of repeat stories. Don't get me started on Doc Savage and how many times he's confronted the same kind of gimmick again and again and again. But again, I also had my fill of Doc Savage for a while. And the art is really good too. It's solid. I'm not putting Johnson down. I'm just saying that I think a lot of us who were with the Rocketeer back in the 80s, watched the movie in the 90s, kind of have an expectation when we pick up a Rocketeer book. And unfortunately for me, not saying for everybody, for me, this book didn't knock it out of the park for me. I still thought it was good and it was enjoyable, but I'm only going to give it 4 slices of meatloaf out of 5. But it's the Rocketeer, Break Free #1, out this week from IDW Publishing. Hope that wasn't too much of a downer for people, but that's just my thoughts on the Rocketeer over time. And yeah, but I know there's some people who are going to just be dying to pick this comic up. So I will say there is no Betty Cheesecake Shot, which was kind of a staple with a Dave Johnson stuff. So there's none of that, but you know, you do get some good art. You get some good action. You get some, you know, bad Nazis. But there you go. Hey, dear listener, we want to know what you think. You can head over to our Discord server. Maybe you've read The Rocketeer Breaks Free #1. Maybe you have your own thoughts on Savage Dragon or the comic book industry as a whole. Head over to our Discord server. You can join the Discord server for free. And I'm gonna keep harping on this, Matthew, until the economy changes. In this economy, when someone tells you something is free, by God, there is no reason for you not to go in and grab it with both hands and say, gimme, gimme, gimme. So go over to the Major Spoilers Discord, join for free, and you can get access to a bunch of channels where you can talk about all of this stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, if free isn't for you, then the other thing that you could do is you could give us a little money to keep this show going. If you want bonus content, if you want episodes that you've never heard, if you want exclusive art, if you want exclusive behind-the-scenes stuff of what's going on at Major Spoilers, then by all means, check out the Major Spoilers Patreon page at patreon.com/Major Spoilers. For as little as $5 a month, you can keep this show going. You can keep us independent. You can keep us from having to cave in to all the big muckety-muck publishers and beg and grovel and do their evil bidding. We can continue to do what we do and be happy that we're doing it and make you happy that we're doing it. So what do you say? I know that we just talked about free stuff over in the Discord a moment ago, but if you find value in what we do and want to give a little value back, $5 a month. $5 a month, that's $60 a year. In fact, if you pay for an entire year in advance, you don't even pay a full $60. You get a discount on that. And listen, if you don't want to pay $5, I understand. It's the economy, stupid. You can also join our Patreon for free. Now, you don't get access to all the bonus content, but you get a sample, you get a taste. I've been putting some rundowns on what we're planning with the show every week. We've also got the Major Spoilers Book Club. You can find that for free over there on our Patreon page. So yeah, you can either check out the Patreon page for free, which again, in this economy, free is good. Or if you're one of those, people that are doing well and you got a $5, thinking about giving it to us, patreon.com/Major Spoilers. And maybe, just maybe, your hair will grow back. What do I mean by that? You're going to have to find out this week in the pre-show.
Are you implying that my hair is going?
Man,
is that what you're implying?
I don't know. I haven't seen a picture of you in a long time, so maybe.
That's true. My hair's actually down in the middle of my back. I don't know how it looks on top. I'm not that tall.
This week on the show, something that we haven't done in a long time. The trade that I was going to do this week, I couldn't get a hold of it. And so instead, I thought we would take a look at a brand new book that is out this week. It is from First Second Books. So not first and second, third in that order. It's like the first second of the clock, when it's ticking. So First Second has out this week a new OGN called Youth Group. And it is about a girl named Kay who winds up in a local church group. And, it's everything that you expect from Christian teens. But she also discovers that this church group of teens are actually demon hunters.
Da, da.
So think Mormons. They're not Mormons. They're not Mormons, but think Mormons meet Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and you kind of get an idea. Oh, even better. How about this? How about Rod and Todd meet Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
I'm in danger.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
What'd you think of this book? I mean, I have, and if people don't know, I have some very unorthodox thoughts about organized religion. But I was the one that picked this because I was like, this will be fun. This will be fine. I'm not going to come in and bash religion, but I will say that every Christian youth group that I've ever encountered is on display in this book. And every reference to Orange County, which is where this takes place, is spot on. So Jordan Morris and Bone McCurdy, they've done their research. And I think in the back of the book, I think Jordan even talks about how he was in Christian teen groups as a kid. So he's bringing it to this. So right on all this stuff, Matthew. So what you're getting, my experience says, yes, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and I have to say I really enjoyed this book, and I didn't expect to, based on the solicitations, because I kind of felt like this is a difficult balance. This is a difficult plate to spin, because when you're talking about, Christian youth groups, and you're talking about this type of actual real world experience, you're dealing with real religions. And the problem with real religions in comic books is it's really hard. Like at Marvel, for instance, there's a notorious issue of Ghost Rider from about 1971 where Ghost Rider is saved because he's been fighting Satan. And then a man in a beard and sandals shows up and tells Satan,
"Hey, man,
get thee behind me. He's under my protection." And I'm just like, Did Jesus?
I kind of feel the same way about Phantom Stranger and his backstory that they've concocted.
See, I hate the Judas Iscariot retcon. That is
Yeah, no, but
awful.
that's what I'm
And to
saying. So
stranger should
when
not
you
have
are
an origin
no,
ever.
that's what I'm saying is when you start putting real religion into your books, you have to treat that very carefully because you're going to offend somebody. And I went into this going, okay, either they're going to really bungle this and really misrepresent uh, Christian teens,
Right.
or they are going to offend somebody
Right.
by taking it too seriously. And I think that they did a good job of figuring out that balance. And I really like how so the premise is there are these demons running around, and Kay and Meg and Cortland are the three. Kay is the new kid; she's a gothy kid, and Meg and
Yep.
Cortland are totally, these early 20-something, bright-eyed, like I said,
Yeah.
Rod and Todd's. But
Meg
they're
is
out.
the sweet girl who's never done anything bad, and
Yeah.
Cortland is the bad boy who brought himself around and,
Yes. Yes.
used
He's been
to
saved.
take acid at Six Flags.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And,
And they're
now
demon
he
hunters, and they're going out and they're hunting demons, and they discover and they bring Kay along. They get her into their little group, and I will say, you can take this as a dig if you want. I don't intend it to be, but the indoctrination of Kay into this Christian group is spot on with everybody I've seen being inducted into a Christian teen group.
Pastor Doug triggered all of my crap
Yeah.
sensors.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, they are spot on in the way that they do this, but they find out that Kay is a blight, meaning that she can't be possessed. Demons can't possess her. And in fact, she may have the ability to possess demons. And the demons have figured out that if they kill blights, they can use the blight's blood to where they can have a physical form on Earth, and they don't have to worry about taking over host bodies. The funny part for me, and I don't know if this was funny for you, is that the Christians only want to deal with the quote unquote Christian demons, and the golems and the others. It's like, oh yeah, the golems, they're taken over there by a Beth Israel group, that teen group, and then you've got the Wiccans. They have their own way of doing things. It's not our stuff, and we don't mix. And even Pastor Doug is like, you stay away from those Wiccans, or you stay away from the Jewish kids, because and the kids, Kay, Meg, and Cortland, are all sitting there saying, aren't we all fighting demons? And it's like, yeah, but there's Jewish demons, and there's Christian demons, and there's Wiccan demons. And the kids are like, no, we need to work together to do this. And so that's also a positive message. Yeah, they throw a rager, they throw a mixer, and all the kids are like, yeah, this is totally cool. And they figure it out. And, there's a bunch of demon fighting and people getting together. And I like this book. And this is one of my other criticisms of religions are that, and it's kind of on display with Pastor Doug. I'll be honest, where Pastor Doug is, you will have nothing to do with those other religions. That religions kind of turn on each other. I don't like that in the real world, but here the kids are like, oh no, we need to work together. And they find out that, hey, we all have common ground in doing good, in the name of their gods. And so I like that there is that positive message in there. And, go ahead.
I like the fact that we get Meg maybe crushing on Thorn, the female leader of the Wiccans.
There's certainly a hint of that.
Making out with one of her people.
Yeah.
And I like the parts of it where these young kids are like, yes, we are definitely, we're saved. We're Christian. We're into this. And Meg is like, I don't agree with the church all the time, but I love you. And I have fire swords. And if anyone says mean things about you, Cortland, I will stab them with my fire swords.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's sweet. That's cute. And it really does kind of feed into some of the positive aspects of, that socialization and that interaction with other kids who share your faith, but also other kids of other faiths. And that is the thing that was really most impressive to me. There are a couple of moments where I kind of went, ooh, but it never flew off the rails when using actual real world, religions and real world faiths, basically, and putting them in the midst of this story about, punching demons in the head. And that is I think, the most impressive part of this. I never had a moment where I was just like, oh, that's creepy. I am a
Yeah.
little bothered that we didn't get to see the Beth Israel kids do anything. I would have liked to see that, but that's
Oh, but
just
one
me.
of them's a blight, though. I mean, the blight's, so Kay is
Well,
sitting on the
sure.
couch next to this other kid, and the Beth Israel leader and Meg are talking, and she's like, "Oh, the blights are always attracted to one another," and so we knew that each of these groups has their own quote unquote blight. Meg calls
Right.
them miracles or something, but everyone just says blights are better. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be
Well,
nice to see. I think, isn't it though at
a
the end?
yarmulke that turns into like a throwing star.
Yeah, like no, at the end, don't they all go up to the New Age nun camp and everybody fights together, or is that just the New Age nuns and the Christian kids? I thought that the Jewish kids and the Wiccans and everybody went to Northern California in that third act.
Trying to see. I don't know because there are points in the art where I see characters and I'm like, do I know who that character is supposed to be?
Yeah, so
But
I
I
think
do know that Cortland's sort of kind of would be boyfriend does show up.
yeah, and he's with the
Yeah.
Wiccans, so yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I'll say about the art. The art is fine. I don't have a problem with the art. I think it's very good. It's better than I can do. Again, this is not meant to be a dig, but if you're thinking about what does this style most remind you of, and I would say this style reminds me of webcomics. Not that that's bad, but it is a very distinct style that you often see in independent comics and in webcomics. Webcomics are great.
Yeah.
I love webcomics. Some people that have helped us out on the site are all about webcomics. But I do see this art style very much. We see art styles get picked up. We see animation styles get picked up and copied. This is just an art style that McCurdy has that I'm fine with. I don't really have a problem with it, but it does remind me of webcomics. And oftentimes when you're doing some simpler art, oftentimes you can get lost in some of the characters.
And I feel like when you look at this particular style, I feel like it kind of does. It spins out of what Dan DeCarlo was doing at Archie in the late '60s, early '70s. In a lot of ways, a lot of that, the style that you're describing, that webcomic style, really does feel like it's not necessarily an Archie story or specifically those Archie constructions, but a lot of the like the bits and pieces, I guess the language of it. When you look at, say, oh, here's a book that's clearly manga inspired. I look at this style and I say, this is clearly something that somewhere back in the line of succession, you're going to find somebody who says, yeah, man, Dan DeCarlo is the best. Archie Comics rule. And that works for me. I really enjoy a lot of books. I feel like it's not the same style, but I feel like this is of a piece visually with Lumberjanes, which I really
Yes.
enjoyed.
Yeah, that's also one that I would say has a very
Yep.
much webcomic style. In fact, Carter Johnson, who does the art for our upper tier patrons over at patreon.com/major spoilers, her art has evolved in the last couple of years, but when she first started, we can go back and look at her art that we send out to those patrons, and we can say, oh no, this has very much got a Lumberjanes vibe to it. This very much has a webcomic vibe to it, which makes sense because her dad, Scott Johnson, does webcomics. Now, granted, Scott's style is very different from what we might think of webcomics, but I like the art. It's cutesy. It's simple. I like simple art. I don't like a lot of extra lines that don't need to be there. And McCurdy certainly does a great job of keeping it simple and making us understand what's going on. And certainly the color palette helps a lot as well. Certainly, what Morris does with language is each group has their own language style. And so, if you're confused, is this person a Wiccan or is this somebody that's part of the Christian Teens?
Right.
Just read a few words of whoever's speaking. You'll instantly know who is who.
Cool.
So
And I
go
do
ahead.
like the visual touch of the demons all have a bold blood-colored
Yeah.
font, which is excellent. I feel like the storytelling and the actual construction, as far as the coloring, as far as the lettering, as far as all of the production elements of the book, top-notch stuff. I'm not familiar. Who is the? At least I think I'm not familiar.
First Second, the publisher.
First
They
Second,
do,
yeah.
they do a lot of
Do I
indie
know that
stuff.
Okay.
I mean, we've covered them before on the site, not necessarily on the podcast that I'm familiar with. But yeah,
Right.
they're a smaller publisher that sends us stuff, and I'm more than happy. And again, any publisher that's out there, big or
Yep.
small, just put us on your press list, and I will post stuff on the site. You don't have to be a Dynamite or a Boom in order to get coverage on our site. First Second can get coverage on our site. If you have something that I find interesting, it may be a trade paperback, or if somebody else recommends it, it could be a trade paperback that we review on a Major Spoilers podcast, or that somebody reviews on the show, or whatever. So, yeah, First Second, reach out. Silver Sprocket is another one. They do LGBTQAI plus comics out of San Francisco. I think First Second is in, I think they're East Coast on that. But okay, so kind of, here's one of my big concerns when I was like, okay, let's just pick youth group. Now, again, I'm the one that picked it. I read the solicitations. I'm the one responsible for this. And I didn't want this to, when I picked it, I was like, this sounds interesting. My second thought was, I sure as hope this isn't a preachy comic.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when Archie had the Christian comics?
The Archie Spire comics, yeah.
Yeah. And how preachy those comics were.
Intentionally, yeah.
Yeah.
Awful.
I was afraid that is what was going to happen here. And like every quote unquote chapter of the book was going to be open up with, some verse from the Bible. They do quote the Bible here and there, but this is not a preachy book. This is not a book that is trying to convert you to somebody's religious views. I mean, maybe it is, but I did not get that. And I'm hypersensitive on religion to begin with. I did not get that from this book. If it was a preachy book, you certainly wouldn't see the Jewish kids, the Wiccans, and the New Age sister nuns in this book. It would have been straight up just, we're the Christians and we rule. So I'm glad it is not a preachy book. It is a demon slayer story that just so happens to have Christian teens as the lead characters. And if you can handle that, I think you'll enjoy this. I enjoyed this more than I thought that I would. I was going to go in with kind of a mid-range view on this, but yeah, this is definitely a graphic novel. And I don't know if this is YA aimed. I don't think it's YA aimed because there's some language, at least with drug reference and certain potential sexual comments, sexual innuendos that are made that may not be for young kids, but maybe young adults, I guess. So this feels like a YA book for me. I'm going to say it's worth checking out. It's Youth Group from First Second. It's out this week at your comic book store. Final thoughts from you, Matthew?
I would agree. I think it's definitely worth your time. And more importantly, it is a book that managed to circumvent most of my worries. And when you have a book that you're like, what if it's this? What if it's that? What if it's the other? And it turns out it's something really good and it's something that avoids those pitfalls. That's definitely worth checking out. It's always going to get my recommendation.
Yeah, very good. All right. That is where we are going to wrap it up this week. Next week, Birds of Prey, Fighters by Trade. Why? Because it's Gail Simone's birthday next week. And yeah, we're going to celebrate that. So thank you for listening. If you found value in the show, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/major spoilers. If you cannot, please sign up for free at patreon.com/major spoilers. Okay. Just to get in there so you can see what we're doing, read news, read updates, that kind of stuff. Go over there and do that. The other thing that you can do that doesn't cost you anything is like the show on whatever podcast player that you're doing. Give us a positive review on whatever podcast service that you're using. Tell your friends about it, share about it, tweet it, share it on your socials or whatever that you do. Get the word out, because the more great people that we can have come into our sphere, the more awesome things that we can do, because we know that you love comics and we do too. And we will talk with you soon.
If I had the X-ray vision of a Superman, I could save a few bucks and stand around and read through the covers of the comics on the stand. But although every other page would be backwards, I suppose, I could still read the evens and the odds. Well, I don't know. Guess I haven't thought this all the way through. Plus, as soon as the comic book store guy knew, he kicked my butt out on the corner. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. But when you think about a better way, if I was hulking green or gray, I could just bust through that brick wall, take their comic books away. But then the little meat would deal with all the tanks and bombs and guns. Have you ever tried to read a series with all that going on? Guess I need to rethink this plan. How would I back and board my comics with such huge hands? Guess I already told ya what a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. If I'm stark raving rich like a man of iron, I might not be surprised to find that I might actually have the heart cold to follow an entire storyline. But would I really even need to read up on all those escapades? I mean, who needs such distractions when your sister's such a babe? But the downside is such a beast, being shot up in a fun, being the Middle East with a gang sign throwing soldier. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. Whoa, 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 whoa. What a major spoiler.
This podcast is copyright 2024 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.